I really don't like the term microbrand. I mean, I say it because it's the vernacular, but I can't help but feel like it's a little bit derogatory, like micro penis. But when does a microbrand become a macro brand? When they ship a certain number of watches or when they start making their own movements? Nobody seems to be able to agree. So in this video, I'm gonna call them small brands. And I have the luck of not one, but two really stellar small brands to put in front of you today. Ferrer has been around for a decade and Neutra is relatively new, but they both are making waves in their own right. And I see a lot of similarities between the two. So this might be a good opportunity to demonstrate how smaller brands mature over time. Hey guys, I'm Max and this is WatchCrunch. If you are interested in learning more about these smaller brands, check out the great community on the WatchCrunch app. Ferrer, for example, was voted to be the top small brand in 2022, and we have yearly bracket-style tournaments to determine the winner. So download the WatchCrunch app. You'd be surprised by the number of updates and new features we've added. In many people's minds, Ferrer has been anointed as the king of the small brands. Now, this company has their watch design dialed in. Their marketing often feels more spiffy than a lot of big Swiss conglomerates. But when I think of Ferrer, I think of colors. Check out this portabella chronograph. I don't mean crazy colors, but just like adventurous use of combinations that really make their watches stand out. The dial here is a deep blue waffle pattern that contrasts with a glossy mustard yellow bezel. Now, I'm no color theorist, but I believe that these two colors are on opposite ends of the color wheel and thus complement each other really well. And though this is a chronograph, the bezel is not a tachymeter, rather it's a bi-directional 12-hour bezel to allow this to be used as a GMT in a pinch. The subdials are a sunburst charcoal gray with white hands that really stand out and pop. The case is also really complex with beautiful facets extending down the lugs, and it's paired with this rubber strap that mimics the same sort of pattern as the dial, almost reminiscent of like a Patek Philippe Aquanaut. The movement inside is the Swiss Sellita SW510 hand-wound chronograph movement, and Ferrer has gone the extra length to decorate the bridge to make for an attractive display caseback. Proportions are Goldilocks. It's 38.5 millimeters wide, 13.5 millimeters thick. Not too big, not too small. Now, price-wise, we are getting to the upper end of what people will pay for a small brand at $1,800, but you really are getting a well thought out piece of kit that ticks a lot of boxes here. Now let's take a look at this big pilot called the Calais. This one from Ferrer was love at first sight for me when I saw it at a show. Not only is it just about half the price of the Chrono at sub $900, but it's also just so darn handsome. It's not easy in this day and age to make a military watch because it feels like everything has been done. And every day I see new brands popping up doing homages of like World War II field watches. And it's really hard to like out-militaire a Hamilton, IWC, Zenith. And after a while, everything starts to look like an homage of something that we are familiar with. But Ferrer has really pulled off something special here, I think. First of all, from afar, this looks like easily 42 millimeters, maybe 44, but put on your wrist, you'll be surprised at how well it fits because it's actually 39.5 millimeters. How is that possible? See, it really comes down to case design. The visual size of a watch is primarily determined by the size of the dial. And this watch, it's got a big dial with almost no bezel. And so it looks big, but it wears smaller. Back to design though. Military watches, like I said, they're hard to do because they're so simple. Designed for legibility first, oftentimes designers find it hard to add the frills. But Ferrer has hidden a number of small details that really put a twist on this classic recipe. First, we get a beautiful green sunburst dial that features a California format. This combines the use of Roman numerals on the top half with Arabic numerals on the bottom and actually traces back to military use, thought to be more legible than, say, all Arabics. The dial also has a crosshair imprinted on it, and it uses custard yellow lume on the hands to contrast with that verdant green background. It's really, really attractive. The second hand features the Ferrer logo in its arrow tip, and everything just has like a big exaggerated aesthetic. The watch is kept to just 12.5 millimeters thin thanks to a Sellita SW200 movement, and added is an anti-magnetic caseback fitting for a pilot's watch. See, it's these small details that make or break a watch in the long run for me. I see a lot of people comparing spec sheets online as if the specs are the only things that matter, but a watch with a stellar movement is nothing if the design can't keep up. The great ones have that slow release charm because we're still finding little nuggets of details in design even a year later. Now, if Fairer is the king, then Neutra is the new kid on the block. First out the gate is this Cortina chronograph. This thing looks like it jumped right out of a 70s catalog. It's sort of got like a racing theme with a muted teal backdrop and cream subdials. Pops of red can also be found on the tips of the second hand and the dial, and the bezel sort of protrudes out almost like a Speedmaster. The watch uses the same Sellita SW510 as the Fairer, which is a Valjoux-based chrono movement, providing about 60 hours of power. This 40mm chronograph actually hides its 14mm thickness pretty well because much of that height is attributable to a high domed crystal. Now, when I see a crystal shaped like this, I automatically assume that it's acrylic because it's traditionally very hard to mill sapphire into a complex shape. But this one, it's indeed sapphire, which is a welcome addition, also not cheap to do. Now, this watch on the wrist is just fun, adding some colorful flair to your wardrobe. For $1,500 paired with this brown suede strap, it's a good way for someone to get that vintage flair without dealing with the headaches of actually buying a vintage watch. Now let's swing into the modern with this big professional diver called the Cristallo. Now, it's not a carbon copy, but this feels like a love child between a Rolex Deep Sea and an Omega Planet Ocean. It's 42mm wide and 14 inches thick. It might be kind of intimidating on paper, but its sub 50mm lug to lug keeps it manageable to wear on my 6.5-inch wrist, but it is pushing it a little bit. But if you can pull this watch off, it's gonna put some hair on your chest. This is not a watch that's content to live under a cuff. It's got 500 meters water resistance, a helium escape valve, and a diver's extension. Wearing this watch, you might just start taking up extreme sports and calling everyone bitch. But the watch is not all brawn and no subtleties. For example, the dial fades from green to black, again, a nod to Rolex. And while not a chronograph, it's got subdials with the running seconds and a power reserve indicator at the 6. The watch feels really solid and well finished, and the bezel is nice and clicky. The bracelet is pretty standard. It's all brushed, sort of oyster style, but you get the sense that this thing can truly handle professional use. It's not just made for looks. And as a budget Planet Ocean, it's only like a tenth the cost of the Omega for about $1,000. So I'm not gonna crown a winner here. That wouldn't be fair to Neutra. That would be like pitting Bronny James against LeBron James. When you look at a Fairer watch, you get the sense that the designer is kind of obsessed over 1,000 tiny, purposeful, confident decisions. It's the little details that really separate Fairer watches from the rest of the small brand space. But give it 5 more years, I'm really excited to see where Neutra will be. All right, guys, let me know what you think about these two brands, and should we stop saying microbrands altogether? Let's continue the chat on WatchCrunch. Download the app if you are a real watch nerd, and I'll see you there. Take care.